Happy Monday, folks. Welcome to a new episode of the Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast. I'm Tyrone, joined as always by Jay. Jay, your week treating you good? How you been?
Everything's been good, man. I'm staring out the window at a beautiful afternoon here in February. You got snow covered rooftops, and I got a nice warm cup of coffee. So life is good right now. Can't complain. That's for sure. How about you?
Yeah, can't complain. Still able to do a little bit of work during this lockdown, which is nice. But same, looking at all the snow. Just actually finished a cup of coffee, so I'm in the exact same boat as you.
Perfect. It's beautiful. It's just it's fun. Usually, just full disclosure for everybody, folks listening, that typically Tyrone and I record at night because of our schedule. So it's actually kind of nice sometimes to record during the light of day. It it brings a little bit more of a different perspective for us. So this is actually a rare treat for us to record on an afternoon.
Yeah, it kind of makes you feel a little bit like a normal person as opposed to a night owl who has no concept of date and time anymore.
Exactly. That's exactly what I would attribute it to. But yeah, we have had gotten some great reviews about our Royal Rumble watch along episode. That was a fun experiment for us. We really enjoyed presenting that to you folks. Both Tyrone and myself were having a lot of fun recording that one, and as evidenced by the recording, we had both imbibed a bit on the particular evening. But nonetheless, really enjoyed the presentation. Really enjoyed the Royal Rumble. And I don't know if you folks have noticed, I'm sure that you have, those of you listening, that we've been touching a little bit more regularly on modern day product. Now, we're not going to necessarily do that every week, but because there was some big news this past week in the world of wrestling, I think, Tyrone, you wanted to mention something that kind of piqued your interest and caught your eye.
Yeah, for those of you who watched AEW Dynamite this past week, we saw a familiar face show up there, and that is, of course, New Japan Wrestling contracted performer Kenta. So not only do we have AEW working with Impact, but now they have a working relationship with New Japan, which means, in my mind, they're going to get Ring of Honor involved. And I wouldn't. I think I heard rumblings of AAA as well. So it's just a modern day everybody up against the Fed, it seems. I'm kind of digging it.
Yeah, I mean, we had talked off air about how it reminds me of kind of it, like in the '80s, the last ditch effort of some of the promotions like the AWA and the WCCW and promotions of that nature. I think Mid South was in there as well. Memphis talking about Super Clash. So obviously, it's a much different climate right now. These companies aren't sort of in the same dire straits that those companies were, 30 plus years ago. But it is really exciting to think about all these dream matchups and dream situations that we do have on tap right now. It strikes me as a much more collaborative, cohesive effort as against what we've seen in the past with these interpromotional connections. I think the most handy example I can think of a really, really good working relationship that was on a mainstream level was probably New Japan and WCW back in the late 90s. That was really, really well executed. But since then, I mean, and WWE's been really largely the biggest game in town. There hasn't been any kind of cross promotional synergy in a large scale. Maybe ROH and New Japan as well would be another
Well,
real more modern example. But
that's exactly what I was just going to say is Ring of Honor has been working with New Japan for close to a decade. I know you and I have both gone to shows in Toronto where it's a Ring of Honor card, but they feature tons of New Japan wrestlers where we've gotten a chance to see the likes of Jushin Thunder Liger, Shinsuke Nakamura before he was signed,
mm-hmm.
a whole bunch of the Bullet Club, like the New Japan, or not New Japan, sorry, the Young Bucks were there when they were New Japan contracted workers. It was fantastic.
No, absolutely. I think more to my point was just on this kind of level, this scope and scale. We haven't really seen a lot of this kind of cross promotional or inter promotional contact on a large scale, and obviously AEW having that contract on Turner really puts a lot more eyeballs on the product as opposed to ROH and New Japan doing their thing. So I think it's a great thing for the industry, and I think that the more opportunities that are created through this, the better off everybody's going to be. And it's certainly going to make for very interesting television. I mean, you have all these different brands and all these different promotions. And again, many dream matchups and dream scenarios that perhaps weren't something that any of us would entertain a year or so ago. necessity is the mother of invention, and maybe this pandemic has, silver linings here. Obviously, you don't want to say anything positive has come out of the pandemic, but maybe this one little thing of this era of cooperation is something that we can attribute to the pandemic era. I'm not sure.
Well, and with Kenta being the number one contender for the IWGP United States Championship, do you think that match will happen on an AEW show, or will we get it on a New Japan show? Will there be a giant pay-per-view down the line like a Super Clash with all of these different federations involved? What do you see happening?
I could see them doing interpromotional matches, sprinkled in here and there. I could definitely see a larger pay-per-view down the road. I mean, we don't know what the future is going to hold, but I would think that maybe if you're going to do like a really large pay-per-view involving all promotions, that's something you might want to wait until you have audiences for. I could definitely see them doing something at Wrestle Kingdom next January. Also, there is a good possibility that we could see this turn out to be something that's really big for them at All In or All Out, whatever they're going to call it this year. That September pay-per-view, which seems to be their version of a WrestleMania, the AEW's version anyway. I definitely could see them doing some kind of big blow-off matches at that, leading through through the spring and into the summer. So there's a lot of options on the table right now for sure. And again, for some of these smaller promotions, in terms of their TV time and their exposure, like an Impact and like an ROH, that are really struggling to break through right now. Even in NWA, this is a great boon to them. So I think it's really great.
So one more question I want to ask you about this, and that's, do you think that we could potentially see a super card on or around WrestleMania weekend as some competition?
I think it's too early for that. I mean, there might be wheels in motion right now. It's certainly a possibility, but I feel as though you need to establish all the players and establish some storylines before you start integrating people into a large-scale pay-per-view like that, into a super card type thing. I think it's just a little bit too early. I mean, I guess you could theoretically do it with the weekly television on AEW, but I think that you need some more time to introduce audiences, because you have to remember that while I do think that AEW's audience is more of a niche hardcore wrestling audience than, say, a casual WWE fans viewing experience is, I do think that there is room to educate the audience a little bit more before we start presenting those big cards. What do you think?
I could see it happening around that time, just because, like the way you say with the weekly AEW television, to build up all of the feuds and tell the stories, we're getting the same thing with the WWE right now. We just started the road to WrestleMania, so who's to say that they can't do something similar? You have it already on paper that it's going to be Kenta versus Mox, because that's just the U.S. title match. We all know it's happening. It could happen then. You could bring in the Bullet Club members from New Japan, the Guerrillas of Destiny, Tomatonga and Tonaloa. No, I totally butchered that name, and I apologize.
I think it's Tangatoa and Tangaloa.
Yes, that's it. And Bad Luck Fale. Like, I'll bring in all of the OG Bullet Club and have them feud with the Bucks and the Good Brothers and Kenny Omega, do an Elite versus Bullet Club thing to a degree. I think there's already stories there that all they need to do is just kind of improve a little bit and get us to the match.
Well, I think to your point as well, though, I mean, the thing that just crossed my mind when you were running down those names is not to go too far back in history here. Well, that's what we do with our show, but I'm kind of feeling like some NWO vibes here, in a sense that like so many of the Bullet Club members were spread out through different promotions, and a lot of the main members, but there's a few exceptions, obviously glaring exceptions, but a lot of the meat and bones of the Bullet Club are actually in all of these promotions that are working together as a conglomerate now. So could you potentially see like a Bullet Club invasion of AEW with all these different promotions? I don't know. It's possible. I mean, I know that Cody's a huge fan of WCW, obviously because of his father and Dusty's booking and all that kind of thing. So could we possibly see some sort of a rehash of an angle? And then once you see some bigger name stars, WWE stars contracts start to look close to expiry, would they come in? I mean, there's a lot of exciting opportunities and a lot of exciting potential stories that are coming out of this.
I could totally get behind a Bullet Club invasion angle as long as it wasn't the watered down NWO angle that we ended up with, where they're just throwing a Bullet Club t-shirt on anyone and everyone. As long as they just keep it the core group, I am more than okay with that. And when you think about the fact that they have Sting under contract now, you could really relive that moment and have Sting versus the Bullet Club. I don't want to see it, but that could totally happen.
No, absolutely, and I agree with you. I mean, I could definitely. I think he's going to have another match or two. If I'm not mistaken, he has a match coming up at the Revolution pay-per-view at the end of this month.
He's got a tag match, I believe,
which is the way he should be used right now. I don't know if we necessarily need to see a Sting singles match when the guy's. I think he's 61 or 62. Now, not to say that, not to dismiss him at all. He's in phenomenal shape, but he's got a bad neck as well. So maybe just have him come in and do some high spots. That's really all you need from him. I don't know what his physical status is, but to your point, you could definitely bring in some names from the past to help, sort of crescendo the whole thing. So there's a lot of options on the table, a lot of meat on the bone, as Tyler would like to say from the Count It Out 7 podcast.
Absolutely. But I think it's time we start talking about a couple of older things now.
Absolutely.
We're going to do a little bit of this week in wrestling history. We haven't done that in a week or two, so why the hell not bring it back? You got something for me there, Jay?
I absolutely do. So February 8th, 1999 was actually a very interesting night in the Monday Night Wars. We had the Monday Night Raw is War at the Skydome in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And we had a all-time indoor attendance record for Monday Night Raw at that time. And a record that I don't believe has been broken since, 41,432.
It 100% is still the record right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a huge night. I was there myself. I thought it was a phenomenal show. It was so cool the first time you get to see the Titantron and the stage and all that kind of thing, the pyro. Get to see all that kind of stuff live in person for the first time. Were you there, Tyrone?
I was not. My parents were not letting 12-year-old Tyrone go to an Attitude Era show by himself at that point.
That's fair enough. I appreciate that. I went with my brother and some other folks, and we just had a blast. It was so much fun. Of course, it was Steve Austin running the corporate gauntlet 1 week away from 6 days actually away from the St. Valentine's Day Massacre pay-per-view, where Vince McMahon and Steve Austin had their first one-on-one match inside of a 15-foot high steel cage, the old Big Blue that was actually painted black for this one. And of course, that was the debut of the Big Show, Paul White. And then, of course, not to be outdone, across the channel on TNT, we had Monday Nitro, and that was actually emanating from Buffalo at the Marine Midland Arena. So that's really interesting that within an hour of each other, hour and a half of each other, they were running up here, pretty close to north of the border for the WWF, and just a little bit shy of it for Nitro. And of course, on that particular evening, we saw Bret Hart was defeated by Roddy Piper for the U.S. title. I remember watching that one too. That was one of those TSN Wednesday afternoon feeds around 3 p.m. and that was a lot of fun. So it was kind of cool. Actually, I didn't even remember until I did some research that the two companies were in such close geographical vicinity for this particular Monday. So makes you wonder what it might have been like if some of the boys crossed the border one way or the other and got together. There might have been a lot of wrestler partying going on that particular Monday back in 1999.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but that episode of Monday Night Raw was actually taped for Saturday, correct? Due to the Westminster Dog Show preempting them?
I don't think it was the dog show. The dog show is usually in September. I think it was something else that had preempted them, but I remember it was a Raw Saturday night. So we saw it live in Canada on TSN. If you were living in Canada, obviously, and were watching at 9:00, we got the live feed. But USA Network didn't see the feed until Saturday. And of course, we were there live, so I got a chance to see it live, and it was a lot of fun. So actually interesting too, because there was a dark match moment there where after the Corporation had gotten the best of Steve Austin, Mick Foley as Mankind, and The Undertaker, of all people, who was a heel at that time. And he had just had a Buried Alive match with Austin the month previous at the In Your House Rock Bottom pay-per-view. Came out for the save, and then the three of them ended up cheersing cans of beer in the ring. I think it was Molson Canadian. So it's just weird. It was a weird time where you'd go from burying somebody alive to cheersing and having a beer with them a month later. It was the Attitude Era was funny that way.
Hey man, cans of Molson, they forgive everything. We all know that. We grew up here. We've all
That's
had
true.
a pop or two with the Molson label on it.
Absolutely. Definitely
Well,
a fair statement.
For my week in history moment, I'm going to go a little further back. I'm going to go to 84, where the Macho Man Randy Savage defeated Tito Santana for his first, and I believe only, Intercontinental Championship run with the company.
Was it 1984? I thought it was 1985. I didn't think Savage came in until 85.
You are correct. I am a year behind.
I'm sorry to correct you. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Savage didn't come in until 85. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please correct me, Jay. You know that.
I was just going to say that I believe this was before Savage actually had Elizabeth as his manager. He was still vying for managers at this point. Am I on the money with that one?
I was way off. It was 86.
86. Okay, we were both wrong.
Yeah, it was 86. It was against Tito Santana. Yeah, he had just, I believe he had just gotten Elizabeth for his manager, because we were just before WrestleMania 2 at this point, and the whole George Steele being in love with her was still going on.
Right.
But I look at this, and I'm not going to lie, I kind of forget that Tito Santana was an Intercontinental Champion, because I mainly think of him as a tag wrestler and kind of just a jobber to the stars, because when we were growing up, that's what he was.
Yeah, he had a big time run in the early to mid 80s. He was doing big stuff. I mean, I think that by the time he got to being a part of Strikeforce, he really wasn't, that was sort of like the back half of his career in that regard. He was doing some pretty big stuff in the early to mid 80s for sure. I mean, him being Intercontinental Champion, I think he had a pretty solid program with easy for me to say, Greg Valentine as well. So he was doing some pretty good stuff back then, and being the Intercontinental Champion at that time, right around the boom period of the Rock and Wrestling Connection, that's a big deal. I mean, we know what the lineage of the Intercontinental title means. I think that a lot of people sleep on Tito Santana, but at the same token, you have to look at, when Savage took over the title and won the championship, that's, I think, when it became established as the workhorse title. But at the same time, that doesn't happen without Tito Santana and Greg Valentine and people of that ilk.
Absolutely. And it's funny that we look at it as the workhorse title, and still kind of do to this day. But when you see, after Savage, you went Steamboat, then you went Honky, then you went Warrior. So it kind of lost the workers title, or the workhorse meaning at that point. No one's looking at the Ultimate Warrior as the 60-minute Iron Man.
Yeah. This is going to be the match of the night. Yeah, exactly. There was a little bit of a dip there, and then once we got it back on Headache, I think we were back on track. But yeah, you're right. There was a little bit of a dip there with Wayne Ferris, our buddy, the Honky Tonk Man, and then of course the Warrior as well. So, but yeah, our apologies, folks. We were both off the money on that. I was thinking it was 85, and Tyrone corrected me. It was 86. So, apologies for the misstep there. But sometimes with those really, really heavily trafficked times in the business, when things are happening quite quickly and quite rapidly, especially, the Rock and Wrestling Connection or the Attitude Era, it's really easy sometimes to mix up a date or even a year, because sometimes it all kind of blends together, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I don't know what happened in any Attitude Era pay-per-view for the most part, unless it was one of the big four. I could tell you the feuds, but as far as the matches and what card it was, I have no idea.
Yeah, sometimes I just remember, I'll think about something and I'll think it's a certain time, and then I'm like, well, no, that doesn't make sense because that guy wasn't there. And then I have to figure it out in my head, because there's just so much information being thrown at you at once in that particular era. And the same thing with the Rock and Wrestling Era, I think, as well. Tyrone, did you have any more events in history this
I
week?
do not. Why don't you just get us into the show and tell everybody what fun, hot piece of garbage you had me watch this week?
Well, let's not put all the blame on me. We both mutually agreed that we were going to cover this one, and we weren't sure which one of us was going to do it. So I'm not taking all the heat on this one. But this particular week, folks, we are covering Super Brawl 4. It took place on February 20th, 1994 in Albany. Not Albany, New York, not the Pepsi Center, no, Albany, Georgia, at the Albany Civic Center with a whopping attendance of 7,600. Now, this was a very strange time in WCW. There's a lot of people that have a division line in WCW that they prefer it before Hogan came in, and they preferred the old WCW, the one that was kind of in limbo between Hogan and it being bought by Turner back in '88. So there's folks that really gravitate to that era, and there's other people that think that anything pre-Hogan WCW was just trash. I kind of fall in the middle. I think that there's good stuff in all of it. But of course, we are in February. Now, in March of 1994, we're going to see Hulk Hogan come in with that famous ticker tape parade. And then we're off to the races with his run in WCW. And of course, their fortunes changed dramatically within the next year. It's about 24 months, 26 months removed from the NWO coming in. So we're about a year and a quarter from the, or sorry, 2 years and a quarter from the NWO coming in, and obviously the wrestling business changing forever. But this was a really pivotal time in WCW. Of course, you still have Ric Flair on top. He's working with everybody. He's working with even Steamboat here in '94. He's working with Vader. There's a lot of different moving parts to this particular roster as well. There's a lot of underneath talent that I don't even recognize. I don't remember for the life of me. And there's a lot of stars from the 80s and the 90s that are still working at a very high level. So I just wanted to give you a quick synopsis of what's going on. Tyrone, do you have any thoughts about this era before we get into the show?
Just this era of WCW or this era in wrestling in general?
I think just this era of WCW. I mean, it's vastly different from what's being presented in the Fed in 1994.
I liked WCW in the early 90s, like 90, 91, 92. 93, it kind of started to fall off, especially when they started to introduce the International Heavyweight Championship. I thought that was kind of a weird thing that they did where it's like, all right, Rick Rude, you deserve a title, but we're not going to give you the big title, so have this one. I didn't fully understand that.
Yeah.
There was a lot of really terrible gimmicks and gimmick matches. As you alluded to, there were some people on this card that I really had to search out who the hell they were, because I have no idea. It's a transitional phase, as you said. Like, we're going to get Hogan. Shortly thereafter, we're going to get Savage. Of course, we're getting Brother Brudeye, because wherever Hogan goes, he goes. Then we would start to see the switch and the moving of the sails, and all of a sudden the tide is switching over. You're getting the names jumping over within a year, 2 years, and then WCW just takes off for, as we all know, 84 weeks.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing about this, as you said, is that we are in a transitional period, and it is so true. So I have to ask you that, comparing this product, say this is about a month. Actually, I think it's exactly 30 days away from WrestleMania 10. So looking at this pay-per-view as compared to, say, WrestleMania 10. Which product would you have preferred back in this time frame? Like, which one would you have gravitated more towards?
In ring, definitely the WWF. As far as storytelling goes, I might be going to WCW with the exception of Brett and Owen.
Yeah, that's fair. And that was such a well told story. That was really a little shy of a year from storytelling. I mean, from the time that we started at Survivor Series '93 to getting to SummerSlam '94, it was that was a beautiful story. So no, I'm with you on that. Okay, well, without further ado, if you're ready to start rebooking this sucker, how do you feel? You ready to go?
I feel like it can't be any worse than what we watched, so here we go.
All right. Well, our opening contest is Harlem Heat, branded Cole and Kane. Those are their names, as opposed to Booker T and Stevie Ray that had changed not too far from here. And they defeated Thunder and Lightning in a tag team match. Now, for the life of me, Thunder and Lightning, I was wishing for some Thunder and Lightning to cut my power off while I was watching this match. What do you have?
Idea who these guys. I have no idea who these guys were, where they
Neither
came
do
from, anything. I
I.
couldn't really find anything on them. It was ridiculous. Also, what else is ridiculous about this damn show is it was 13 minutes into the event before the first match even had music and entrance music to it.
Yeah.
Dude, 13 minutes of Shivani, Heenan, and that horrible segment with the Freebirds and Nick Bockwinkel.
Yeah, and we sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't know why all of that had to happen. It wasn't even a big feud at the time at all. Is anybody really clamoring for that Michael P.S. Hayes and Johnny B. Bad match? Maybe they were, but I don't know. Albany, Georgia, Freebirds kind of makes sense, but that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, it was brutal. I mean, yeah, we've talked about that on a previous episode. I believe it was the Starrcade 97 episode. We talked about how much it bothered both of us that this was so much the case. It was indicative of any WCW programming at the time, whether it be Nitro, Thunder, a pay-per-view. You always get 10 minutes of recap before we even get the first match in the ring. So you get all this bombastic pyro and the music and the lighting and the Nitro girls or whomever it might be there. And then suddenly you're just sitting there on your hands for 10 minutes. I mean, I watched the Nitro not too long ago that it was literally 4 segments before we got a match in the ring. It was like 45 minutes before we had a match in the ring. So I just had to point that out. And one other thing before you get into the rebooking, I just wanted to mention because I noticed it, was that I thought that the WCW was so far ahead of the WWF at the time in terms of their presentation with pyro. I thought it was so cool. Even in the early 90s, we were seeing pyro. We didn't see much pyro in the Fed until I guess like Razor and Diesel started doing their entrances. So I thought that was a really cool touch that they did have that pyrotechnic display.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. It's always a visual thing. It's nice to see. I don't ever really miss pyro a lot of the time. I'm not like, I know you're a big pyro guy, whereas I think it deserves a time and place, but it doesn't need to be every week. But I see where you're coming from. The other thing that bothered me a lot about this pay-per-view is the amount of times that Tony Schiavone just kept referring to Heenan as Bob.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Nobody has ever looked at Bobby the Brain Heenan and been like, "Hey, Bob, how are you?"
Yeah, it had me conjuring up visions of Richard Dreyfuss and Bill Murray together at the lake house. I don't know why I kept on calling him Bob. It was just bizarre to me.
And there is your early 90s movie reference from Jay for all you kids who are too young for that one. That's a movie called What About Bob?
And boy, is it a humdinger of a movie. If you haven't seen that, you're in for a colossal chuckle. It's a good one.
Now back to this opening match. That match that they had with Thunder and Lightning and Harlem Heat, I don't have that at all. I have my opening tag team match of Max Payne and Cactus Jack taking on the team of Paul Roma and Paul Orndorff. Pretty wonderful.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I can get behind that. I'm not a Max Payne guy, full disclosure. I mean, he was okay. Didn't really do a whole lot for me. I thought that they could have done something a little bit more interesting with Cactus in this time. I think felt like he was kind of just lumped into that spot. But no, that's not a bad. I get the angle. You have the two brutes going up against the pretty boys. You have pretty Paul Roma, and then of course the veteran Paul Orndorff. So yeah, I don't hate it. How does this one go down? What do you have for a finish?
I've got Max and Jack going over because they're the team that needs to be kind of on the rise at this point, whereas Pretty Wonderful's been around for a while. It doesn't hurt them to lose to two gigantic men. And it just builds towards Max and Jack getting that tag team title shot down the line.
Yeah, I can see that. How do you feel about Max Payne? What are your thoughts on him?
I have very minimal thoughts on the Max Payne character, but I do vividly remember Man Mountain Rock in the WWF,
Yes.
and thinking that his pyro, again, we're talking about it, coming out of the guitar, I always thought that was pretty cool in the 90s. So who knows? Maybe Man Mountain Rock was the trendsetter in the Fed for pyro.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe that was the impetus for them doing a pyro budget. They're like, you know what? Since we're doing the guitar, let's just do an opening spread at the beginning of Nitro. Damn it! Or not Nitro Raw. Sorry. We're having fun today. So yeah, I don't hate this match. I think you did much better than they did. Obviously, I'm not sure if you're still going to have Harlem Heat on the card. If you do, that's awesome. If not, that's kind of a shame. But I'm going to keep on going. Do you have anything else to hit on with this one? Or are you ready to continue
I just
moving on
want to
down?
put one thing out there, and that is if anybody knows of the whereabouts of either Thunder or Lightning, hit us up on Twitter, Instagram, leave comments here. I would love to be able to find out who they are, what they're doing, if they're still causing storms together, what's going on, and all.
Yes, that would be an interesting find. Like we could start a series called "The Good Friends, Bad Enemies." Where are they now? And interview Thunder and Light, either Thunder and Lightning together, or one or the other. So,
I mean,
might be fun.
if we want the full storm, we got to get both of them.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you. You can't really have one without the other. Are you ready to go for the next one here, pal?
Oh yeah.
Okay, well, we got another barn burner of a match. I can't believe this wasn't a dark match, but we have Jim Steele defeating the Equalizer. And no, folks, that's not Denzel Washington. This is a different Equalizer, and boy, could he have used some Equal instead of full brand sugar in his coffee.
Well, the equalizer is David Sullivan, though. So he did go on to have a bit of a career when he did the dyslexic gimmick and was a Hogan fan against Kevin and everything like that. So he at least had a career. Jim Steele, on the other hand, again, no idea who this guy was. Did a bit of research, seemed to have a bit of a career in All Japan after this, but I think he had a cup of coffee in ECW, and that was about it. Still have no idea who this guy is. How he got on a WCW pay-per-view, I don't know if they were going for an Ultimate Warrior-esque thing with him, because they did make reference on commentary to how he is always winning and in very short matches. So I'm wondering if that was the hopes for this guy. But yeah, this match isn't on my card. I got rid of it completely, and I put in its place Diamond Dallas Page taking on Too Cold Scorpio.
Okay, yeah, that's much better. I don't think you're going to get much argument from me this week, pal. This is one of those cards, ladies and gentlemen, that when we discuss it, it's really hard to make it worse. So we're probably going to agree for the most part on a lot of this stuff. But no, Too Cold Scorpio taking on Diamond Dallas Page sounds like a pretty good match to me. I mean,
And we got
Dallas was still
like you
pretty
got
green at this point, but
yeah, it's funny to think that he was green and almost a rookie, but still pushing 40 at this point.
yeah, and he looked big. I mean, this is one of the bigger presentations of not overweight. I don't mean. I just mean bulky. He was a bulkier version of DDP. I mean, you compare him here to where he would be, say, in '97 and '98. He looks much different. He looks much bigger, much bulkier. So I think that this would have been a good match, and especially at this time, you could have definitely used Scorpio to help elevate DDP and also help carry him to a degree. I mean, he would have been able to bump around for him and do some really, really cool spots with him. So what'd you have for a finish here?
Well, I do want to touch on one thing there, and I think that DDP now, as pretty much a senior citizen, looks a million times better than he did in any of his wrestling career. His DDPY system that I actually myself have recently started, it is great, and it is doing wonders for so many people. So big ups to DDP and his DDPY. But I do have a page going over, because as you said, we're trying to elevate the young upstart Diamond Dallas Page. It's not going to hurt Scorpio to lose to him. Page is going to get a big shine out of this, going to move him forward, maybe put him in a TV title picture or a US title picture. and then he'll end up becoming the megastar that we all know.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize you were doing DDP yoga, so good for you. I've toyed with the idea of doing it myself. I just don't have a ton of room in my apartment, but no, that's great. Good for you, man. I have to agree with you. I think that Too Cold Scorpio doing the job here is not going to hurt him at all. I just want to go back to one thing that you said real quick about the first match, the actual canon match that happened. Um, this to me is indicative of, like you alluded to, the fact that David Sullivan had that hero worship gimmick with Hogan and things like this. I think it's important for people to note as well that, while Hogan coming into WCW was a big time deal for them and put a lot of eyeballs on their product, much more so than had been previously, it wasn't like an overnight fix either. I mean, that gimmick, that angle with having the hero worship and the Dungeon of Doom and all this stuff going up against Hogan, I mean, that was horrible stuff. Until we really got into 96 with the NWO, I feel as though Hogan's popularity started to dwindle a little bit in WCW until we got that surge of new life with the NWO. I don't know, had that gimmick not happened, if the Monday Night Wars really would have been a thing. I mean, continuing on for as long as it did.
Yeah, WCW kind of treated Hogan in this era the same way that the WWF treated The Undertaker for the first 5, 6 years of his career. It was like, oh, he's a big guy. He can work with other big guys, or he'll be fine. He can get us through this. He's a name. He's a draw. Yeah, but nobody wanted to see Hogan in the Dungeon of Doom. You're just getting rehashed WWF characters with Kamala, with, what was his name at the time? Shark or Avalanche for Earthquake?
It was Shark. Yeah, Shark. Great
And then
way.
Beefcake being the booty man. Like, it just was not good at all. I can't wait until we touch on that down the line, because I know we will.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
No, and that's my point is, and I think a lot of that has to do with Hogan as well. He's like, oh, we drew money in the Fed. I know I can be safe with these guys, like an Earthquake, for example, or Big Bubba Rogers, big boss man type guy. So I just wanted to point out that just because Hogan's coming in a month from now doesn't mean that the fortunes of the company are going to change overnight. Things actually were not at the highest peak pre-NWO. Hogan had been in for about 18 months and things were starting to slide again. So if it wasn't for that NWO angle, I don't know where they would have ended up. But anyways, I just wanted to point that out. So if people are thinking that the product just drastically changed in terms of presentation when Hogan came around, it took a lot longer.
It changed about as much as when Lex Luger went All American in the WWF, which is next to nothing.
That's a great example. That's a really great example. Are you all done with this rebooking of the Jim Steele and Equalizer barn burner?
I mean, I'm all done with the booking of this card in general. So yeah, let's just keep going. Let's get it over
sounds
with.
Good. Next, we have the long-awaited match that we had the hook set in for in the beginning of this pay-per-view. Boy, I couldn't wait to see this one. Johnny B. Bad defeated Jimmy Garvin with Michael Hayes. And this one went an excruciating 10:48.
So for this one, I kind of kept the same. He's injured. Bockwinkel makes him wrestle. I didn't have Jimmy Garvin involved at this point. So Hayes is forced to wrestle. So you're getting Michael Hayes versus Johnny B. Bad. Then, as Johnny B. Bad is just wailing on Michael Hayes, Jim Garvin comes out, makes his return. I guess he's no longer a pilot. He's back to being, what are they called? The Freebirds. And he helps Michael Hayes get the win. So Hayes beats Johnny B. Bad, not cleanly, but it's Michael Hayes and the Freebirds doing what Michael Hayes and the Freebirds do.
So would this set up for something in the future, like, say, Johnny B. Bad finds a partner and they do like a tag angle, or is this like a one-off with Garvin coming back in, or did you really think that far ahead?
I didn't really think that far ahead. I just kind of tried to get this one on the card still to a degree, and I know I had gotten rid of so many other things. I wanted to keep a few things still there.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And obviously having, being in Albany, Georgia, which isn't too far from Atlanta, I mean, obviously having the Freebirds there, you're going to get a little pop for those guys. So yeah, it makes sense to have the hometown guy go over. It doesn't happen that often. So, and I don't think at this point, Johnny B. Bad had been in the WCW now for I think since 90 or 91. So it probably wasn't going to hurt him any to go to do the job, especially when it wasn't clean. So I think you're fine on
Do
this
you
one.
do you realize what this feud was over to?
No, I'm
It
not
was
really
it
sure.
was it was over Johnny B. Bad apparently having the better track on a WCW album.
Jeez.
Michael Hayes took offense to that, and essentially we got the WCW version of battling over a Japanese shampoo commercial.
Yeah, some of the stuff is like you can't even explain it. I don't even know. I mean, who's sitting in a booking meeting and thinking that's a good idea? We're gonna battle over a WCW Slam Jam album. I don't know.
I mean, in '94, I'm pretty sure it was the American Dream.
Well, you know, I think history's been very kind to the Dream in that sense that he had some amazing ideas. He came up with war games. He came up with some incredible ideas and concepts that we still adhere to today in 2021. But not to speak ill of the deceased, and I'm certainly not trying to disparage Dusty at all, but not every one of his ideas was a kernel or a like a diamond. He had some flops as well, and I mean some of his ideas were not great.
Oh, of course he had flops. He's a human being. Like, yeah, I agree with you 100%. But like, tell me a booker that had nothing but success.
No, I agree with you. I just think that sometimes people sort of think that Dusty's booking was so incredibly ahead of its time and so incredibly intelligent. And a lot of it was. Don't misunderstand me, but he definitely had some flops there as well, and like major flops, like some stuff that really didn't get over. So I enjoy the majority of his work. Don't misunderstand me, but there's definitely some stuff that I wasn't a huge fan of. And this would be one of them. This sounds like such a silly angle.
Oh, absolutely. And then that's why I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm completely over it.
That's totally fine. Next up, we have, in my opinion, what was the match of the night. We have Lord Steven Regal taking on Arn Anderson for the WCW World Television title.
So I like right from the get-go that they made this feel like a big match with Michael Buffer doing the introductions. It wasn't treated as like a secondary or a even lower title on the roster. It was a title. It meant something. So having Buffer do the introductions was already big. Arn Anderson getting one of the biggest pops of the night. Four Horsemen, everything is great with him. Regal, I can't believe how young he looked at this point. Looked great. Nothing on this match changed for me. It's the exact same outcome, exact same match. I really liked it. It was match of the night.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I just want to point out as well for anybody that's listening to this, that's a fan of old school storytelling and watching a story build, seeing how to put together a match where stakes and drama start to really build to a fever pitch. This is such a great match to watch. If you see the transition spots, you see the rest holds, you see the grappling, and you see how it goes from a technical, really, really technical and a very sound match to breaking down into a little bit more of a brawlish type style. You see the interference from the manager as well. I mean, this was such a well-told story. This is the kind of match that you could show somebody that doesn't need to know about anything going into the match in terms of the angle or the storyline. You could just show this match to someone and they'd be able to pick up on who the heel is, who the face is. They'd be able to pick up on the story they're telling. It's just masterfully done by two of the greatest of all time.
The only thing that nobody would be able to guess is how old Arn Anderson was at this point.
Yeah, but he looked incredible. I mean, I've heard Arn at times be a little bit self-deprecating about his physique, that he wasn't, shredded and this and that. But he looked like such a powerhouse worker in this match in particular. I mean, in his career, he was never a six-pack guy. He was maybe a six-pack guy after the matches, but he was never a six-pack ripped to shreds guy. But boy, did he look powerful, and did he ever look like he was in incredible shape here.
he looked like the role he was playing, the enforcer.
Absolutely. 100%.
Not necessarily somebody that you would think is going to beat the hell out of you, but he's going to beat the living hell out of you.
Yeah, he was. I can't say enough about this match and these two performers, and I'm not certainly not trying to dismiss Regal as well. To your point, Regal never looked better. I mean, his physique here, he looked phenomenal. He was always another guy very similar to Arn in that way, that he was never the shredded, ripped, prototypical wrestling superstar like an Ultimate Warrior type or a Rick Rude type with the 8-pack and all that kind of thing. But boy, could Regal do some amazing things. He was in incredible shape doing kip-ups and all this kind of stuff. Both these guys were in incredible shape. They looked phenomenal and at the top of their game here.
I don't think I'd ever actually seen this match before watching it today. When did I watch it? Today, yeah. And it was incredible. I had my eyes glued to the screen the entire time. I may go back and watch it again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if there's one match you're going to watch on this card, I would say that this would be it. I mean, obviously, we can't watch.
It's the only one. It's the only one you need to watch 100%. You can skip pretty much the rest of this goddamn card.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I wish that in some way, like we could almost be like in Star Trek or something where we could program the holodeck to be able to present the matches that we are rebooking here and watch those in real time. But unfortunately, we're not in the 24th century, nor are we in the Enterprise D. So let's go ahead and continue on to our next matchup here, unless you have anything else to say about that barn burner.
I don't, but before you get into the next one, I want to just sneak one more match in between.
Okay, let's do that. I'm in.
So throughout the show, or maybe it was only in one segment, but we definitely had a segment where Ricky Steamboat said, pretty much announced that he was the number one contender and that he was challenging whoever wins between Flair and Vader, and we were going to get that match. I thought, why not just put a number one contenders match on this card? So you have Ricky the Dragon Steamboat going one-on-one with Terry Funk.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I mean,
I like having Funker on the card. Anytime you get Steamboat in the ring, you know you're getting a good match, and you know Terry Funk's going to work his ass off with him. I think it would be, even in '94, Terry Funk was still giving his all. Like, you look at what he was doing in ECW around that time, a couple years later. Even in '97 in ECW, when he had the famous Triangle Ladder match, like, Terry Funk could still go in '94.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just trying to think of the styles. I don't know if this. Yeah, I could see it. I could definitely see it. I don't know if the styles would complement each other the best. But no, you know what? I think it'd be an entertaining match. I like that. I think it's definitely much better than anything else we've gotten on the card thus far, other than the Arn match in the actual presentation that we both watched today. So no, I like that. How would you have it? How would you have it conclude? What would be the finish on this one?
Well, the reason of adding Terry Funk to this is when I looked into the roster of WCW in February 1994, there really was no other option. If you were doing a heel versus babyface type thing, this is where you were going. I have Steamboat going over because it's going to build to the next pay-per-view with the winner of the main event, which I'm not going to spoil for who I have going over in that one just yet.
Right. So I just want to just expand on this for 1 second. So in canon, we have Ric Flair going up against Ricky Steamboat down the line here. How do you feel about that match in 1994? Like, they had that incredible trilogy back in '89. It maybe is the best trilogy in the history of wrestling. It's arguable. How do you feel about that match in '94? Do you think it lives up to the lineage of the feud, or do you think that they should have left it alone?
Well, it's always hard to live up to something that they've done so well in the past. But considering this is only 5 years later, I think both guys are still perfectly capable to live up to it. Flair was still doing some of his best work in the 90s with the reincarnation of the Horsemen later on with Benoit, Malenko, McMichael. Like, he was still fantastic then. So I think him and Steamboat could still go at this point. You look at Steamboat at, what was it, Mania 25?
Yeah.
Yeah, the man was in better shape than his opponent. Like, him and Chris Jericho tore the house down then and the month later. So in 94, 100%, I'm saying Flair and Steamboat can live up to it. I don't know if they can top it, but they can live up to it.
Yeah, I was just curious. Just a quick little sidebar. I just wanted to see what you'd think because, those are two names that are so synonymous with each other. And I know that Flair has gone on record as saying many times that that Steamboat is his greatest opponent. So I just thought I'd ask you quickly what you think about that one. But anyhow, that's a very interesting rebook there, or actually an addition there with Steamboat and Funk. I like that. I know the more I think of it, I think wouldn't be a Styles Clash situation. I think it would be a very interesting way to see how I think maybe the story of the match would be how Steamboat adapts to Terry Funk's style, because he would have to in some ways. So I think that's really interesting. I like that idea. That's a good choice. Good booking.
Thank you very much. You're being very complimentary today, and I enjoy it.
Well, I just figured since we had to watch this match, we're both in it together in the foxhole, so we had to watch this event together. Let's just be kind today. The next match we have on the roster, or rather the pay-per-view here, is Cactus Jack and Max Payne defeating the Nasty Boys for the WCW Tag Team Championship. What do you got for me on this one, bud?
So I still have a tag team title match, and I still have, in my opinion, one of the greatest tag teams ever in the Nasty Boys in it, obviously. But they're defending the tag team championship against Kane and Cole, Booker T and Stevie Ray, Harlem Heat.
I had a feeling this is where you're going to go with this, and I have no problem with this whatsoever. I think it's a great choice. I think it makes a lot more sense to have these guys going up against the Nasties for the tag team titles. These guys had a 10-time tag team title reign. That was really a tongue twister. For those guys to go on to win the titles 10 times as a duo, for them to go up against the Nasty Boys, I mean, they have the pedigree, they have the lineage, and they have the expertise to be challenging. So I think that this is a great choice to switch these up. How do you have it going down?
I still kind of have a similar finish with Nasty's losing by disqualification, because I didn't want the title change yet. I didn't think Harlem Heat was quite there. They were on the cusp, and I know they'd win the straps not too much longer later, but I wanted the Nasties to keep it for at least one more event.
That's totally fair. I get that 100%. So for you to have them, I think sometimes to get certain talents over, you need to have them on the chase a little bit longer. So I think for these guys to chase the titles, have them in the title picture and then lose by disqualification, it becomes a compelling story when you can then have them ultimately overcome and win the titles through adversity like that. I think it adds a little bit more sauce to the goose, for the lack of a better term. So I think that that's a really good way of doing it. Prolong the story a little bit longer, and then the fans want it just that much more when you deny the fans the big celebration of the title win by the Harlem Heat. I think that's a good choice. I like that a lot.
So with you saying that Harlem Heat being 10-time champions in their own right, in my opinion, there is no more decorated team in WCW. Maybe the Steiners come close, but would you say Harlem Heat is the most decorated tag team of all time? Or would you maybe put the Dudley Boys against them? Like, what do you think?
I wouldn't put the Harlem Heat as the greatest tag team or the most decorated tag team of all time. Maybe of WCW. That's very fair. I think you'd have a hard time arguing against Harlem Heat as the greatest tag team of all time in WCW. I mean, if you're going by title wins, then definitely they are. But I also would have to say that, to your point, the Steiners were a huge team. Maybe not so much in the later 90s, but obviously in the 80s and early 90s, they were the team without question in WCW. And then of course you have the Road Warriors. The Road Warriors were so synonymous with NWA specifically, not so much WCW. They had a brief run in '96 there, but yeah, I would.
And that's it. I want to separate the NWA and the WCW on this one. That's why I
You have to. You
didn't
have
mention
to.
the Midnights, didn't mention the Rock and Roll.
Yeah.
I'm just WCW, Harlem Heat for me.
Yeah,
But
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that.
back to my most decorated tag team of all time. Who are you going with?
Now, when you say decorated, what do you qualify that as? Do you say it just based on title wins, or what is it? What's the criteria?
Title wins, long term effect in the company, how long they're able to stick around for, gimmick changing or gimmick staying over, just overall, like who is the most decorated best tag team of all time in your opinion? And I swear to God, if you say Men on a Mission or something from the fucking New Generation era, I will hang up on you right now.
Okay, so the smoking guns are out. No, I have to say, for me, it has to be the Legion of Doom. It has to be the Road Warriors. They had the longevity. They were at one time as over as any single act in wrestling. They were. I would argue that they were as over as Hogan was at one point in the '80s. So
there's a reason why even to this day they call it the Road Warrior Pop.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the obvious answer is the best answer. I'd love to be able to sit here and tell you that I have a differing opinion, or that I'd like to come up with a name that, pull it out of my hat and say, oh, this one for sure. Are they my favorite tag team of all time? No, but if you have to pick one to be the overall picture, for me, it's the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors for sure.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that. I mean, again, they're not my favorite team. Probably not even maybe top 10, but definitely not top 5 or top 7, if you will. But I would say my favorite tag team of all time is going to completely catch you off guard, and it's probably the Nasty Boys.
I know you're a huge Nasty Mark.
I think that Knobs and Sags were great. They clearly weren't the most technical wrestlers, but they could brawl, they could sell, they could bump, they could still work with the best. Like they had a great match with the Hearts. They've had great matches with the Steiners. Like I love the Nasties. They can do no wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah, they were bad workers, and as to your point, I mean, they had runs in the Fed and in WCW, so, and the AWA, of course. So they had been all over the place, and they'd work with the best of the best. I do have to say, I would have loved to have seen the Nasties work in the Fed in like the golden age of tag teams. Like we had a really, really solid tag team division in the Attitude Era and the early 2000s. We had a really, really good tag team era, or tag team division. But I don't think that you're ever going to have a better tag team division in the history of the Federation than in the 80s. Even to this day, there's some solid tag teams, but I don't think it's ever come close to where it was back, from 85 up on until like say 90, 91. You're never going to have a better tag team division. I mean, yes, the WCW or NWA they had some amazing teams as well, but I always think that the golden age of tag team wrestling was in the WWF, and it was in the late 80s and very early 90s. So I would have loved to have seen them be a part of that as well, and work with, say, the Killer Bees and work with the Bulldogs, and that those would have been really cool matches as well.
I agree with you that era was the best for tag team wrestling, but I won't just say the Fed. I'm just going to say North American tag team wrestling in general was
That's
fantastic at that point. Starting in like 82, 83 and going upwards till even 93, 94 really. And then it just kind of became an afterthought.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And so I mean, you look at even WrestleManias. I mean, I know I'm focusing on the Fed now for a second, but you even look at like you had the US Express, and then you had the Dream Team against the Bulldogs, and then you had all these incredible, like, look at WrestleMania 3. Look at how many tag team matches we had at WrestleMania 3, and how many amazing tag teams we had. The Hart Foundation against the Bulldogs. I mean, you had such amazing tag teams back in the 80s. And of course, on the other side, you had the Midnights, and you had the Rock and Roll, then fast forward a couple of years, then you had some factions that had amazing tag teams, like the Varsity Club, and you had the Dangerous Alliance, and all. And that's another cool thing with the Dangerous Alliance was you had these factions where you could put these superstar singles competitors together and have these very formidable tag teams. Even Larry Zbyszko and Arn Anderson as a tag team was amazing.
Former champions, of course they were amazing. It's two of the greatest. It's the Living Legend and the Enforcer. Of course they're going to be great.
Absolutely. Well, I think that you did a good job. I'm glad that Harlem Heat stayed on the card. I had a feeling they would, but I didn't want to say for sure. So you have my stamp of approval on that one, and I love the way you booked it because we're going forward. They were that close. They were about an inch away from getting the titles, and now they have to chase a little bit longer. So that's a fun little wrinkle. The next match that we have is a Thunder Cage match, and it is Sting, Brian Pillman, and this young upstart. I don't know if you've heard of him before, Tyrone, named Dustin Rhodes. They defeated Steve Austin, Rick Rude, and Paul Orndorff with Colonel Robert Parker. What do you have for this one, pal?
Okay, so hear me out, because here's where shit gets weird. It's called what? A Thunder Cage match?
Thunder Cage match, yeah.
So who else to put in a Thunder Cage match than Thunder versus Lightning?
You're not being serious right now, are you?
Absolutely not. I just wanted to scare you a little bit there. I still have a six-man.
Like, what are you doing to me? You just doing this to like cause problems, or
I still have a six-man in here.
Okay.
It is pretty much the same, but obviously I took out Paul Orndorff earlier, so I replaced him with Bunkhouse Buck.
Really?
Only because the following month after this is when we got that absolutely atrocious King of the Road match with Bunkhouse Buck and Dustin Rhodes. So I'm just planting the seeds to build to that.
Yeah. Okay. I thought the Bunkhouse Buck or the Bunkhouse match, that match you're talking about, the King of the Road match, I thought that happened in '95, but I don't know. My dates are.
I did look it up after, and it was the next event. It might not have been that match, but it definitely was Dustin and Bunkhouse Buck.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I just put him in there because the feud's already about to happen.
Yeah, that I understand that. This match was nothing more than plunder, anyways.
This cage was terrible.
Oh my god, it was. Yes, was it? And, you know what it was? Also, it was like turning. Sorry, go ahead.
But why the fuck are we doing a six-man tag inside of a steel cage where they still have to tag in and out, and all the normal rules are still in effect?
Yeah, this whole presentation was brutal, and the other thing about it too is, like, I was just gonna say that this is like if you had like a toy wrestling ring and you bought it to a laundromat and you like flipped over one of those laundry carts and put it over top of your toy wrestling ring. That's what the cage looked like. It was so brutal. I don't know who came up with this steel cage concept. It went around the ring, but there was no roof on it. It was brutal, this cage. It was so horrible.
The only thing I didn't hate about the cage was that the roof kind of curved a little bit. So they did make it so that you weren't able to climb out, ideally. In a perfect world, you're not climbing out of it, but let's be real. Almost everybody probably could. It was just done for aesthetics to be like, nope, we've done everything we can to keep them in there, blah, blah, blah. It was awful. This cage belongs in the worst cages in history.
For sure. And the other thing about it that I hated was that when you threw somebody into it, the whole side of the cage moved, like the whole wall. It was brutal. Like, it wasn't even secured, at least with a Hell in the Cell. Like, back, I guess now in this day and age too, but at least with the Hell in the Cell, like back in like '97, you'd have them throw them into the Cyclone fence. You'd have some give, or you'd have like the same thing with the Cyclone cage. Even with the Big Blue, it would give a little bit, but this one, it's like half the cage moved when you threw a guy into it. It was horrible. This cage, I hated it.
I feel like that's why the spot at the end of the match when they shut the door on Sting's face, when it clearly didn't hit his face at all, I feel like that's why that was done.
Can we also talk about how brutal the set looked. I mean, it was fun. Like I love the ramp to the ring, like indicative of Maple Leaf wrestling. But the set, it was like it looked like a high school football pep rally that somebody had just gone and painted like banners in a high school, and they were putting it up and I was waiting for cheerleaders to come out, maybe RoboCop after.
Hey man, 94 WCW in Albany, Georgia. I don't know what else you were expecting.
I don't know either, but I wasn't expecting like a paper mache set. Looked like something I made in arts and crafts class during an elective period.
I will say I did keep the finish pretty much the same. Sting slamming Pillman on top of Austin, getting the pin. Doesn't hurt anybody. Keeps going with storylines. You get the Austin Pillman. You get Dustin Bunkhouse. You get Sting and Rude. And if any of those, they're all interchangeable if you want to do that too. You could do Austin and Sting. You could do Rude and Dustin. You could do all those different intertwines. But let's be real. We're at this point where Dustin Rhodes was starting to come into his own as the natural. We were about a year and a half or so away from Goldust debuting and just changing the world of wrestling as we know it.
Yep. No, this
by 94, Rick Rude was kind of done. His career was coming to an end. Bunkhouse Buck, I don't think Bunkhouse Buck was a thing after like 94, 95. Sting obviously is still a thing for some fucking reason, but yeah, and then obviously you're building Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Well, yeah, and I was just going to say that I don't think that Rude had too many more matches after this. I'm pretty sure that 94 was his last year in ring as a competitor for his career, that 94 was pretty much it. So I don't know how many more matches you're going to get out of this. But again, to your point, I mean, every guy in the match, with maybe the exception of Bunkhouse Buck, every guy in this match was going to give you a really, really solid, stiff, snug effort. So I think that this match, just in terms of work rate, would have been good. But again, your point is well served or well taken with those rules. I mean, you're still tagging in and out. I mean, this really should have just been a giant caged brawl, if anything else. I don't know why you would have still adhered to rules and then had a cage involved. It was just bizarre. So, no, I like your finish on that. I think it's good.
And it's almost like with early WCW, if they're going to do a multi-man cage match, it's follow all the rules or electrocute somebody, a la the Chamber of Horrors.
Yeah, and make sure that you shoot when have a camera directly on the switch when it flips down, and then somebody has to quickly flip it back up. So, no, this was. Sometimes this is a very, very good example of overbooking something. You don't need, just don't have the cage then. And then, of course, for me as well, I think it's so similar to what's going on with the Hell in the Cell pay-per-views these days, is it takes away from the main event. Like, why have two cage matches? It's so stupid. Keep this a 6-man. Then you can have the high-flying spots outside right by the crowd. I don't know. It was so awful. Anyhow, are you finished with that?
I am, but just to one point here, not only have two cage matches, but have two cage matches back to back.
Yes, exactly.
I just want to keep rolling right now. We're going to go right into the main event. We're going into Vader and Ric Flair for the WCW Championship. I don't understand why in this match there were no rules.
Yeah, I know. It does make sense.
There were chair shots. There was everything going on here. And it's just like, oh, okay, cool. It's not like we just saw one 5 minutes ago where they had to follow every rule. And now we're just getting a total brawl. But
and don't forget that we had the Law in the ring. We had the Guardian Angel. I believe that was his gimmick at this time.
No.
Yeah, Ray Trailer.
He was the boss.
Oh, okay. That was another creative masterpiece, calling him the boss.
Which, I don't know if you noticed, but during commentary, Bobby Heenan kept referring to him as Boss Man.
I was hoping somebody would maybe call him Springsteen, but anyways, that was just getting him in there for what? Why? Why was he even there? I don't know. Anyways, what's your rebooking on this?
We know why he was there. He was there to set up a feud with Vader, but why he was dressed the way he was, still playing the same character. Ray Trailer is a very talented wrestler, but putting him in all these stupid gimmicks are just ridiculous.
Oh, he
It's
had that. He had the Guardian Angel. Then he was Big
Big
Bubba
Bubba
Rogers.
Rogers,
Then
which
he
I'll
was.
I'll take Big Bubba over any of the other ones.
I'll just take him as Ray Trailer at one point. Like that's fine with. I don't need this. No, I'm right there with you. I mean, it looked like as well like that knockoff uniform that he was wearing. It looked like something he got like at a stag shop. It was brutal.
Yeah, it was a combination of like male stripper meets mall security guard.
Yeah, it
Either
was
way,
Paul
it was
Blart, an erotic dancer.
it was Chris Farley if he were playing a mall cop but still doing his Chippendale dance from SNL. That's what it was,
But I will
and it
say that
was terrible.
he did look like he was in really great shape though. He looked really good. He got into really great shape towards the end of his Fed run, and he looked pretty good here.
Flair looked like he was in great shape at this point too, but I did laugh at like the montages that we saw throughout the show of him running up and down the stairs. I don't picture Ric Flair ever doing that. I'm
Yeah,
sure he did, but when I picture Ric Flair working out, it's him in a gym, then in a sauna, then drinking and partying with all of his women. It's not
yeah.
him training alone, running up and down stairs a la Rocky.
I think that this might have been the leanest I've ever seen Ric Flair look. Like he looked really lean in this one. Usually he looked like he had like a little bit more of a bulkier muscle mass. This is probably the leanest and most cut that I've seen Ric Flair in his career. With maybe the mid '80s he looked similar, but this was the leanest I saw him in the '90s anyway.
Yeah, I still have Flair going over. It's still him winning to build up to him versus Steamboat, and then that way you can still get Ray Trailer against Big Van Vader down the line.
Is this
One
still in a
thing,
cage?
what this match?
Yeah,
Yeah, the cage is already down, and I already addressed like why the fuck are we doing no rules in the one and then so many in this one? So we're gonna
yeah.
keep it in the cage.
Okay.
Uh, I do want to address Vader's fur coat cape thing that he had on the way to the ring. And I
Yeah.
want to know why he didn't wear that all the time because that was fantastic.
It looked like the cape that the Blob wore in Billy Madison.
Well, Vader kind of reference is kind of the revolting blob to a degree. So it
Yeah.
works for me.
Yeah, I know it does, but this again, like I completely agree with you. Like I think that you kind of tie the two together, right? Like thinking that we just seen a 6-man cage match with adhering to every rule. Like I'm surprised we didn't get a disqualification with somebody getting thrown over the top rope. And now we have this match with absolutely no rules. It's all plunder. It was bizarre. So I'm glad that you kind of tightened up the booking on this. I think Flair definitely should have gone over. I mean, there's an interesting question for you too, actually, just to go off on a little sidebar here before we wrap up. What do you think if Vader hadn't left to go to the Fed in '95? Where do you think Vader would have ended up through the course of the Monday Night Wars with WCW?
Sidelined. I don't think they would add much for him.
You really don't think that he would have been like? I guess you could have been part of the NWO. Maybe it may have been like a heater for them.
No, he would have gone. I just don't see him really being a thing because it's not like him and Hogan worked much together. They had that one big feud that ended up on an episode of Baywatch.
Oh yeah,
But
we are so covering that. By the way, that bash at the beach that was actually on the beach, that's going to be covered one day for sure.
that's 100%. I'm 100% down for that. But I just don't see Vader being a main event star after that. I see him kind of going maybe down to the U.S. title, maybe being like a hacksaw Jim Duggan the way they booked him. I just
Yeah.
don't see good things that they would have done for him.
No, I agree with you. I think that he was also maybe looked upon. He would have been looked upon at that time, like when the NWO came in. He might have been looked at as like a bygone era, and by that extension, been booked like way far down the card. It was definitely smart for him to go to the WWF at that time. And then, of course, I think probably he would have just ended up in New Japan or something like that at that time. So I just was
And I
curious
know
what your thoughts were.
And I know you feel the same way, but I think Vader is the most, if not one of the most underrated big men of all time.
I would say he's neck and neck with Bam Bam as being the two most underrated big men in the history of the business.
Abso-freaking-lutely. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah, those two guys both deserve to be a lot more. I mean, I think that they are very well thought of in the business, but I think that definitely that they should have more of like, okay, let's put it this way. This new Legends, the WWE Icons that's come out this past week with the debut episode being Yokozuna, I can't imagine that these hour and a half long documentaries are going to go away. People are going to clamor for this kind of content. I know I was glued to it. And then, of course, we have Lex Luger and Beth Phoenix and the British Bulldog and RVD coming out in the coming weeks. I definitely think that we need to see a Vader and a Bam Bam one coming down the line. Those are two names that definitely deserve fuller length documentary features about their lives, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Like, there really hasn't been something on either of them at all.
No,
which I
not at
guess
all.
is kind of similar to almost everybody in this Icons series that they have going on, except for RVD. He's had a couple of DVDs put out on him. He's had the backstory told about him. But we've never had one on Luger. We've never had one on Beth. We've never had a full length on Bulldog or Yoko. So I am 100% looking forward to this because there was a lot of things in the Yokozuna one I didn't even know. I
Yeah,
didn't know
me
he was
too.
originally going to be a head shrinker.
Yeah. Might be interesting. Like, I'm just going to tell you too, like, you might find this interesting, but the one I'm looking forward to the most is Luger. I mean, I love Bulldog and he's one of my favorites of all time. And I love the Yoko one. And I'm interested in all the other ones too. But for some reason, there's something about the Luger one that really interests me. I can't wait to hear from his perspective how he feels about being put into that position of being, for the lack of a better term, put in Hogan's shoes and then it failing so miserably, how much responsibility he takes of that himself, how much is put on the shoulders of the Fed. Like, it's going to be, I think that one's going to be the sleeper episode of this whole thing. I think is going to be the Luger episode.
I'd also be curious to hear his opinion on, the fact that he pretty much killed Miss Elizabeth.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm not going to go there, but I'm with you. I'm sure it's going to be addressed. I'm sure it's going to be talked about. So with that being said, though, my friends, I think you did a really good job rebooking this Super Brawl. Do you want to quickly just run through the card with a brief synopsis so that we have it here for our listening audience?
Yeah, we opened up with Max Payne and Cactus Jack going up against Pretty Wonderful, getting the win there. Then we went into DDP and Scorpio with DDP going over Scorpio. Then we had Michael Hayes and Johnny B. Bad in a terrible match that we only did to get Jimmy Jam Garvin on the card in Georgia. From that, we went to the fantastic match of Regal and Arn. That one was perfect, didn't have to be changed at all. After that, we went into. Did we go into the number one contenders match after that? I think we did. With Ricky Steamboat going over Terry Funk.
Yep.
Followed by the tag team title match of Harlem Heat getting the disqualification win over the Nasty Boys. Then we go into All the Rules Matter cage match, 6-man with the faces taking on the heels. The faces taking the win. And then the No Rules at All cage match with Ric Flair taking on Vader and retaining his World Heavyweight Championship.
That was a mouthful, my friend, and that was a boatload of 94 WCW. The booking wouldn't improve, as we've alluded to. It would incrementally improve here and there. Obviously, the Hogan Flair. That's actually one thing we should quickly touch on right before we close, if you don't mind, Bud, is we're hurtling towards Flair and Hogan for the first time on pay-per-view. Do you think that was a big time missed opportunity for the Fed to do that at WrestleMania 8, or do you think that it's fine being left to WCW?
Is there anybody that doesn't think it was a missed opportunity?
I think that there's two schools of thought. I think that a lot of people think that they did. Well, certainly within the WWF, I've heard this story for years. People have talked about it, how they saw the matches on house shows. They weren't particularly good. They were okay. And they just thought that there would be a better way to go about 8. Like, we're going to rebook WrestleMania 8 at some point. I'd love to do it this year because I have a great idea for it. But definitely, I would have rather have seen Flair and Hogan over Hogan and Sid. I mean, that goes without saying. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know that any of their matches in my recollection were ever really all that great. Like, they were okay, but I don't remember them having incredible chemistry in the ring either. So I don't know.
Yeah, but But at that point, they hadn't been in the ring yet in '92, especially if they had done it at 8. So you didn't really know. The only people that knew were the ones that had seen it on the house show circuit. There
Yeah.
was no internet. There was a bit of tape trading, but at a house show, it was really hard to find that. So
Yeah.
you wouldn't know. I just think it was the two faces of the two main companies for so long going against each other in front of 80,000 people. Like, I don't get why they didn't do it.
I'm wondering. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, maybe you could have done it at SummerSlam '92 as well. You could have done it in front of 80,000 at Wembley. That would have been a big deal too. I don't know. It's, this is a discussion for another time, but I just think it's interesting because this time period in WCW is so strange that it almost parallels the new generation of the WWF in a way, where you have some people on the roster that are from sort of a bygone era of the early '90s and the late '80s, and then you have the new stars as well, and they're all mixing together, and then one's going to take off and one's going to go in a different direction. So it's just funny to me that in that way that these two rosters parallel each other, and the presentations are very different on both channels. But
Yeah, except with the WWF New Generation, we got people like the 1-2-3 Kid, we got Hakushi, and then in this we get Jungle Jim Steel and Thunder and Lightning.
no,
Don't get
I
me
agree
wrong.
with you.
Don't get me wrong. There were some misses in the New Generation too. We all remember TL Hopper and Tekken or Techno Team 2000, whatever the hell they were called. But yeah, I would take the New Generation over '94 WCW anytime.
Yeah, me too. Just based on in ring, not a question. And I think that as well, like when you look at those stips, like we just talked about that stip for the rights to the album, and that one guy's track was better than the other guy's. I think even the booking in the Fed at this time, even as hokey as it was probably a little bit more logical. So anyhow, with that being said, we're going to put a bow on WCW 1994 right now. I'm sure we'll revisit it sometime. I have zero doubts that we will revisit that infamous Hogan and Flair match as well. That's this, as we just alluded to, in a couple of months from now, about 4 or 5 months down the line in this same year. But with that being said, my friend, I am curious to know what I am rebooking next week, as it is a very, very important day for many of us. It is Valentine's Day. What do you have for me, pal?
No, Valentine's Day is technically this week, Jay. It's on Sunday.
Well, it's
Monday
Valentine's weekend is what I mean.
Monday is the lovely holiday in Ontario known as Family Day.
It is.
So to tie in with Family Day, I have decided to get you to rebook WWF St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Okay, perfect. I don't know what that has to do with family, but okay. The WWF St. Valentine's Day Massacre from 1999. I'm all about it. This was a fun show. Kind of a weird time. I mean, we're talking about transitional times in the company. We're in a transitional time right now in terms of storytelling with the WWF back in February of 1999. And we're just talking in our news or our history of the week about that Raw is War at the Sky Dome. That was the go home Raw for this show. So yeah, I'll have fun booking this one. Some of my favorites are on this card. One of your favorites is on this card, Gold Dust. So we're going to definitely have some fun talking about this one. I can't wait to rebook this one. This should be fun.
This one's going to be a lot easier of a watch, I find. Well, I say that, but then I tend to forget how terrible sometimes the Attitude Era was. So we'll see.
I remember this show being pretty good, actually. There was a really fun, hardcore title match where they end up fighting in the Mississippi River. So I remember that one being pretty good. This was a pretty solid, from my memory now. I haven't watched it for a while. But this was a pretty solid card, if I'm not mistaken. So we'll see. We'll definitely see. But no, I appreciate that. That'll be a lot of fun to book that. And if they want to hit us up on social media, pal, how do they do that?
Well, I mean, if you want to hit us up on social media, especially if your names are Thunder, Lightning, or Jungle Jim Steel, we are on Twitter, good_enemies, good_enemies on Instagram. Facebook, you can find us at Good Friends, Better Enemies podcast. And of course, Count It Out 7 YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, comment on everything we do. We recently have gotten a couple of requests for shows. We're looking into it. We're getting to it. I promise you we will do those shows down the line.
Yeah, and those may or may not be bonus shows as well. We do have a little bit of time. We're a little bit in limbo, Tyrone and I are right now with where we live geographically, our restrictions and what's open and what isn't, and it's going to certainly affect our ability to record in our schedule. So we may have a fair amount of free time coming up, and we may not. But rest assured that your requests and your comments have been read and been addressed, and if you requested a show, we're definitely going to record it for you. So don't you fret and don't you worry. We're going to get that content out to you. We're going to try to do it as quickly as possible. But with that being said, unless you have anything else to hit on, my friend, I'm going to take us home here. And for myself and Tyrone, thank you very much for listening. We can't thank you enough. All of you who have been clicking that subscribe button and listening to our content. We love sending it out to you as much as you love taking it in and enjoying it. For WCW SuperBrawl IV from 1994, and for next week's 1999 presentation of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, you've been listening to the Good Friends, Bread and Enemies podcast.
Bye.